You're watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and one of the things we feel it's important to do on Shalom TV is give Israelis a chance to share their perspective in their own voice on issues pertaining to the State of Israel. And so I'm particularly pleased to have with me today Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves in the Israel Defense Forces, David Raz. David has a long and distinguished record of service in the IDF, commanding combat units in the 67 Six-Day War, in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and in the First Lebanese War of 1982. David went on to serve in IDF intelligence, was in the command plane in Israel's dramatic rescue operation in Entebbe, and David then became heavily involved in Jewish education, working to this day with the Jewish Agency in a number of projects, including their program of Shlichim, in which Israelis travel to communities outside of Israel, representing the Jewish state in marvelous fashions. And as if that were not enough, David Raz is also one of Israel's premier tour guides, working with individual families, with groups, as well as with bus tours, giving visitors to Israel a unique and fabulous introduction to Israel and giving them insight into Israeli life. And David, what a joy it is to have you with me. Thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure. It's my special pleasure.
There's so much to talk to you about. David, we see right now that there is this kind of upheaval, social upheaval in Israel. The way it's portrayed is among the young middle-class professionals who feel that the gap has widened between the very rich and virtually everybody else in Israel. We read about the Israeli economy being controlled virtually by 4 or 5 very powerful, large Israeli families, and that the rest of Israel is scurrying to sort of keep their heads above water. You are a typical Israeli in terms of being part of the middle class. To what extent do you and your wife Leslie and your children feel that there is economic injustice in Israel? To what extent can you give us insight into the economic upheaval that is currently plaguing the State of Israel?
Well, it's not a new issue.
Yes.
It's been there for many years. It's not only a matter of injustice, because injustice is in the feeling of a middle class. It's always relative. So I can't say that my family we are suffering, and so on. We could do better.
But you're not suffering.
I don't think that the young people who are demonstrating today, at least the leaders, are suffering. It's not a matter of suffering. It's a matter of a long period of sort of injustice in the sense that the country is booming. The Israeli economy is booming relative to other countries in Europe and maybe even to the United States in that sense. I mean, our unemployment is lower than in many other countries, but the middle class hasn't got any benefit from the situation. And the feeling is that because everything is booming, why the middle class, who's actually sharing the biggest part of the burden in the Israeli society, they are the ones who pay taxes. Those are the ones who are really working hard. Those are the ones who are serving in reserve, in Miluim, in the army, and so on and so forth, are not getting the reward that they're supposed to get in this situation.
we read that there are 100,000 protesters, that there are protests in 10 Israeli cities, that there's this tent city put up in Tel Aviv. It sounds, again, outside of Israel, to be a more severe problem than you're describing. And I was wondering if I had your children on. How old are your children?
Well, my eldest son is about 35. Actually, he has a birthday today. I just got off the phone, greeting him. And my second son is 32, and my youngest son is 29. Look, it's not a matter of suffering. It's not that they don't have bread. The thing is, what's the margin of is there a margin to the income that they can use?
Do you feel bad for your children?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, personally,
Yes.
I was privileged to be enabled to help them a little bit, but they worked very hard in order to buy their apartments. They have big mortgages, which they will have it for a long period of time. And we are talking about a little bit of a margin of spare money that they can save, B, enjoy the life that they deserve because of the hard work and their burden that they carry for the Israeli society. So most of the people who are demonstrating, I would say maybe not most, but a big number of the people who are demonstrating are not hungry for bread. But they want a much more comfortable living. They want a future for themselves and a future for their children, which is very difficult to accomplish these days.
To what extent is this Netanyahu's either fault or problem?
Look, I wouldn't put the blame. I think the blame is in the general trend in Israeli society, which was going on for quite a long period of time, loss of community feeling and more individualism, which comes together with an advanced country. And I would blame the state or the leaders or the politicians for giving their hand into this quick or too quick process of praising individualism. And again, David Raz speaking. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I think that we went too much towards the capitalism and and losing the welfare state that we had before. A government that was caring, a government that looked forward to not equalizing everybody, because if you work hard, you can accomplish many things that those who don't work hard or don't study or don't have education will never accomplish. But I think the government and the politicians who need to be the leaders lost that vision. And because of that, in the end of the day, the wealth has been channeled into a small upper echelon in the Israeli society, which have all the benefits, and the rest don't.
Do you know whom these 4 or 5 Israeli families are?
Yeah, these are famous people who are in the news and in the gossip columns and in everywhere. So everybody knows who they are. In Israel, everybody knows everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you resent them?
Not at all. I mean, personally, they're good people. And they made the money, as we say, biyosher, in honesty and... I'm not
legitimately?
Legitimately, when most of them, well, I wouldn't say far families. I mean, it sounds like the mafia.
I know.
No, these are not people of mafia. These are people who worked hard for their money, and maybe had a little or a big amount of luck on the one hand, but on the other hand, the system allowed them to accumulate these benefits and this big fortune. Many of them are involved in social, in working for community and in giving for community and so on and so forth. So it wouldn't be fair to resent them. No.
Okay.
I almost said some of them are my good friends. Well, they're not my good friends, but I know friends who are working for them and so on, which they deserve any penny.
Are you angry in general about aspects of Israeli life?
Yeah. I mentioned that before. I'm angry about us losing this feeling, this in my sense, is the Jewish feeling of caring for your friend and for the poor, or for those who are underprivileged. I think the state has leaned too much towards privatization, and not. I never wanted a complete socialist country, society. But I think from the point of view of caring and thinking for the future, I mean, many young Israelis, when they leave the army, they have a very gloomy future in the sense of getting themselves decent living, and living quarters, of course. And for that, I'm caring because I know what the future of my grandchildren is.
Mm-hmm. And you're worried for your grandchildren.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm worried for the country. I mean, my grandchildren are the country. And when I say my grandchildren, I don't mean my personal ones. My friends' grandchildren, so on. I want them to stay in Israel. I want them to have a good life in Israel because it's a good place to live in spite of everything that you can read in the newspapers or so on. It's a wonderful place to live in. And I want them to have the same type of life that I had.
I want to ask you about a different aspect of current Israeli life. And I want to ask you what you feel, and I want to ask you what your wife feels, and I know Leslie as well. Your children had to serve in the Israeli army as you did.
Of course.
And I know that every generation of Israeli has hoped that their own service is the last service.
That's right.
And that by the time they have their children, there will be peace. And even if there is service, they won't be in active combat. But lo and behold, your children did have to go into the army.
All three of them, and in the same unit I served in. So that's even became a tradition.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that aspect of current Israeli life, to what extent, you're a father, your wife is a mother, and I know that she worries when her children are on Milurim and have to worry, are they safe? And that to some extent there's I don't even know if I want to go through this anymore. I want to know how you feel about it when you see your children have to go off to the army. And then I want you to talk about how your wife feels. And in that context, how do your friends now deal with this reality of Israeli life that in fact has gone on generation after generation? And I told our viewers, you have been in virtually every moment in the past 50 years of the State of Israel's combat situation. And I know how desperately you wanted that to be over for your children, but it isn't. How do you view it? How does your wife view it? How do your friends view it?
Look, first of all, the military service is part of Israeli life for many years, and it will still be, unfortunately. So we see it. When I say we, I mean my wife and I, Leslie and I, and my friends. For that, speaking about that, we see that as a necessity. On the one hand, on the other hand, we see it as part of we see it as a privilege to be part of those who care about Israeli security and so on. There's a big difference between being this idealist and even an army officer. And I went through a few wars and several other critical moments, dangerous moments on the one hand. And I had a father and a mother, or mother and a father, or a mother and a father. So every time one of our sons went into the army, we always hoped that it'll be when Oren, our eldest one, joined the army, we said, okay, he'll do his service, but Yuval, who's the second son, will be spared. Well, Yuval went into the army too, into the same unit, the combat unit and so on. And then Nadav, our youngest son, when he joined the army, we thought that maybe our grandchildren won't join the army. I don't see that happening. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I see them serving too. And that there are many scary moments, and all my military experience and all my sort of, if you want to say, the glamour and the understanding and knowing exactly, or maybe knowing exactly what is going through, was a big source of anxiety and worried and many sleepless nights. Both of my eldest sons served in the army while I was still in the army. So, and I knew exactly where they were and how they might be treated and so on and so far. So far. And from that point of view, you're a human being and you worry and you...
And what does your
You
wife
eat your
say?
nails.
What does your wife say?
Well, again, look, Leslie made Aliyah by choice to Israel. She was born in South Africa, but she came to Israel in the 20s, and she's part of the Israeli society. And we know this is what we have to do. But she's a mother, and she worries double. And I spared her from many stories and many things that I knew that were happening, in order not to ever be worried more. On the one hand, on the other hand, we are a couple, and we are parents, and we are. It's not only caring for our children; it's caring for all our friends' children and the neighbors' children, and in general.
If I were to ask her, is the danger and the potential sacrifice worth it, or Leslie, would you want to pick up and leave Israel? What would she say?
No, never. I mean, this is our home, and it's more than just a physical connection. It's a spiritual connection. It's a feeling of belonging. It's a feeling of wanting to develop a better society than in other places. Unless there's something to compare, because she came from South Africa in its darkest days and so on. No, I mean, there are moments that we spent several years in the United States working. I was working, and Leslie took care of the kids mainly. Later on, she also became a Hebrew teacher without any credentials, and she was a very good Hebrew teacher. So we sometimes we envied the life in the United States. First of all, we envied the amount of water, the quantities of water. I mean, it was something. We landed up in our first period in Milwaukee, right on the Lake Michigan. And I always used to say to myself, if I had 1/10 of the Michigan Lake and one of the small little rivers in Wisconsin, we would have been well off. And you saw the Jordan River, right? The big Jordan River. It ain't the Mississippi.
No.
So we envied the life and the easy going and the politeness and the quality of life that you can develop if you don't have all these threats around and so on. But we never even think, and I don't think even either of my 3 children would ever think of leaving Israel for good. They would like to travel, they would like to experience life outside of Israel. But otherwise, no, never.
You talk about how you hoped each son who went into the army would be the last son, and now you believe your grandchildren will also be in the army?
Well, they're still young. The eldest one's 5, but
still,
if you want to be realistic, yeah.
And it leads me to ask you, David, what do you feel the prospects are for a real peace with the Palestinian people on the West Bank and in Gaza?
Look, if you want to be realistic and you want to judge it according to what's happening on the ground, to realize a true peace, a peace like between the United States and Canada, it'll take a long, long time.
A long
time. It's maybe not. I think the simple person in the street on the Palestinian side and the Israeli side have the same desires, because everybody wants to. And I've been speaking to people in the last few years while traveling. They have the same desires.
Are you talking about speaking to Palestinians?
Yeah, just Palestinians. Yeah. You speak to them because you meet them in East Jerusalem and you meet them in other places. There are Palestinians who come to work in Israel, not the same numbers that used to come before, but they come, and you can see that these people want to have a good life, and want to live a good life and a normal life, as we say. But there's a big gap between the desires and the mistrust that both sides have. So I can be optimistic till tomorrow that won't bring the situation closer. So it needs a long time to build up the mistrust that's between the two people.
When you hear people argue within the Jewish community over the extent to which Israeli settlements on the West Bank are an obstacle to a peace, no matter how far off it is, where do you find yourself coming down on this? Do you say to yourself, yes, the settlements are a real obstacle? Do you feel it is a trumped-up issue?
Look, it has two sides to the story. But if you ask me about obstacle, I think people make up the obstacles. And there are natural obstacles which you have to confront. And there are obstacles that you build up in your imagination and in your perceptions and so on. Personally, and I was involved in my military service in the Nachal unit in establishing a big number of settlements, which many politicians on many sides of the map or in many places call them the obstacle for peace. Mm-hmm. Now, though some of those, some politicians might have had in mind by building these settlements a grand plan that they'll be there forever.
And a greater Israel.
Yeah, and the greater Israel. I think, again, I can't speak for somebody else, but I think that if I read the map correctly, the majority of people in Israel do understand that some of these settlements will have to be dismantled or turned over or erected or whatever. But that will happen or can happen only if there'll really be a desire and understanding that the other side means true peace. It's not only tactics in order to get these settlements away, in order to get their land back, but that they really want peace. So if you want to put a headline, these are obstacles for peace, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. I do think that today to put up new settlements is not wise. If you really want to have a genuine negotiation, if you just want it for propaganda, that's a different story. I would like to believe, and I can't sit in the heads of my leaders today and say that if they are genuine or not. There are signs, on the one hand, there are signs that they are, on the other side, at least in rhetoric. On the other side, there are signs that they are not really genuine. I don't know. I don't know how to judge that. It will have to be, as we say, tachlis, if they really will show that they are doing something in action, not only in speaking.
If I were to be in a social gathering with you and your friends, and the conversation did go to politics, I have no idea whether it does or not, but let's supposing it did, would I hear most of you and your friends saying critical things of the current administration? Would you say critical things about Israeli politicians in general? To what extent are you and your friends happy with the way in which political leadership has behaved? And I'm saying it that way because I'm not asking you, unless you want to talk about Netanyahu and Tzipi Livni and Ehud Barak individually. But there is a collective Israeli leadership right now. And I'm curious how Israelis react to the quality of your political leaders.
First of all, you asked me about my friends. So my friends, my close friends, and my social circles,
yes,
consist of people from the left and from the right and from the middle. So, and we get along very well together. I wish some of the Israeli parties, our politicians, would get on as well as we do. Mm-hmm. We have differences of opinions, very big differences with some of my friends. That doesn't mean that we're not good friends. That's one thing. Look, in general, I think my generation now, or at least maybe not my generation, but the circles that I spend time with are not satisfied with the leadership. I think it's a very shallow leadership. It's a leadership that doesn't have a vision, doesn't think to the very far future. It's what happens today, and how am I going to survive today, and not how is the country going to survive in the coming years, and so on. So there's discomfort, and we spoke before about the demonstrations. The demonstrations are not only for bread. I think there's a yearning for leadership, true leadership, that you can sit down with, and that you'll feel that they have a vision. Look, there's a long-term vision that maybe cannot be accomplished today, but you have to give people something to cling to, and to get a feeling that at least that they are fighting for you and that they're representing you in the true sense of representation. Not that I elected them and now for 4 years they can raise their salaries and have a good life and forget about the country. Now, of course, what I said now is very extreme. I do believe and I hope, and I think to the greater extent, many of the politicians do care. Because they have the very similar problems to what that we share the same problems. On the other hand, on the ground, it doesn't show that. We don't see it in that sense, and it's come to a boiling point now. It's not that you asked me before, and I don't think I addressed it. I can't put the blame only on the current administration. I mean, it's a process that went on for many years, and everybody had a share in it, left and right. So in that sense, the public in general is yearning for leadership. And if there was a good leader from the right, and let's assume that my politics are not the right-wing politics, I might vote for him if I feel that he's a leader and that he cares, and not only cares, but he's going to carry out the caring into actual maneuvers and actions.
Do you support the concept of a two-state solution?
Yeah, I don't think we have any. I think you have to be realistic. I mean, in my big dreams, when I was a child and I read the Bible, and they said, "Min ha'prat ad Nahal Mitzrayim." I mean, I always envisioned that it was beautiful, this place to go and visit and have hikes and so on. But you have to be realistic. I mean, there's a big, in a sense, a nation that lives together with us, or people that live with us. They still have to form a nation, and they have to decide what they really want. But there's no other way, and I think it's a general realization, except for maybe a very small margin of messianic dreamers. I think that's the situation. I want a Jewish state. I want an Israeli Jewish state, and if you want a Jewish state and you want a vast Jewish majority, that's the only solution.
Do you believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is sincere when he says he now supports a two-state solution?
I would answer you in a humoristic way. Ask him. Let him give the answer. Look,
that suggests you're not sure.
No, I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure.
Even though he says it.
Because I personally would like to see actions connected to words. So come out to the public and say, this is my plan. I can like it or not, but this is my clear plan, and I want to take this plan, in more detail than just general rhetorics. I want to know what you're going to do. If tomorrow you're going to sit down in negotiations, I don't want you to tell me all the secrets. It's obvious that,
of course,
that you need, if you want to succeed, you can't have a public debate on TV of how I'm going to carry out my plans. But I want footnotes. I want headlines. I want to know where we're heading to. And at the moment, I'm confused. I don't know.
Give me one example of something the government could say or Netanyahu could say, and David Raz would say, "Aha, that makes me feel he's serious." Give me one example.
Give in general the borders that you see. You know what? Not the negotiation borders. The borders in the end of the game. What do you see tomorrow? In realistic terms, that would be one thing that I would, for instance, how do we share the natural poor resources of this region? How do we share together with them? More concrete plans, and give a time frame. I mean, don't say that I think that on the 1st of June 2017 we'll sign a peace agreement, okay? But give a time frame. Don't smear it. Show me a serious intention, or more serious intention, because I think it's serious. I mean, again, I'm not here to criticize my prime minister. Of course, not in public, on TV. Bibi has a lot of rights. The prime minister has a lot of rights, and he didn't come from the street to the premiership, on the one hand. But on the other hand, I don't want evasive. I want very clear things to that I can decide if it's right or wrong.
When Prime Minister Netanyahu says to Mahmoud Abbas, I'll meet with you anytime, anywhere, including Jerusalem or Nablus, does that mean anything to you?
It means that it sounds very nice.
Doesn't it?
I think it's very polite. I'm prepared to meet with you any place and any time. If you call me at 12 o'clock at night, I'll get up. Or I'll even meet you in my pajamas.
But you know what,
okay?
you know what he's saying.
Yeah. But I want to say, add to that, a little more clear things that we mentioned before.
Okay.
Again, don't disclose all your tactics. Don't disclose everything, but give something to him and to the public. To me.
Okay.
To my friends, to people who want to know a little more.
Okay. And when you look at the things that Mahmoud Abbas does and says, to what extent do you believe he is serious?
Look, I don't think. I think he and Bibi can be very good friends because both of them are very evasive, in that sense. Me as a citizen that reads the papers and listens to the news and discusses and has a little more access to information than maybe the average person. Maybe.
Yes.
I'm not sure about that either. Look, he is also under very, very strict constraints, and he has his baggage, maybe even worse. Well, I don't know. I don't want to compare who has a bigger baggage or who has more pressures, daily pressures. But at least it's consistent with what he says in a way. But it's very difficult to say tomorrow. He'll do what he in general declares and so on and so forth. But again, here I was also expect from him to come up. I know he's risking a lot, but come on, take a few risks and let's see what happens.
Many American Jews whose perception is that Israel has tried on numerous occasions to make peace with the Palestinians, the most recent example being the withdrawal of troops from Gaza, and that the Palestinians have never taken advantage of the overtures, whether it's at Camp David in 2000, whether it has to do with the negotiations that Olmert was with Abbas, and that Israel has indicated time and time again its willingness to compromise and make peace with the Palestinians, and that all Israel has gotten in return are rockets from Gaza into Sderot and Ashkelon, and that a constant wave of terrorism, and that the next thing we see is Fatah and Hamas entering into a unity agreement. And so people sort of say, the problem isn't Israel. The problem is there's no interlocutor on the other side. Are American Jews making it too simple in black and white?
Look, obviously the situation is complicated. There's no doubt about it. By the way, if you mentioned it, the withdrawal from Gaza. I mean, I think in general, in the headline, it was a right move. It was done in a very clumsy way because I think Ariel Sharon, at the time, made a very bold decision, very similar to the withdrawal from Lebanon of El Barak, but we did it one-sided. We never put any conditions for our withdrawal from Gaza because we could have gained political gainings from an agreement. So
they wouldn't enter into agreement.
So why? So now you have to make a decision. Do you want to end bloodshed for Israelis? Do you want to pull out settlements who had a strategic value, or at least were there for negotiation? Because I think there was no reason for these settlements to be in the first place.
In Gaza.
In Gaza. In the way they were established there. Right?
Yes.
Well, there were one or two on the north, in the southern part that made sense, but in the middle of the Gaza Strip to have an Israeli settlement, it means that then it's like a
bargaining chip. You believe it was?
It could have been a bargaining chip.
Was it a provocation?
in a way, some of them were created the provocation. But again, it depends. Just as the question of obstacle for peace. If you want to make them a provocation, so they are provocation. But it doesn't make any sense, because if you know that the result in the end will be a two-state solution, so why do that? I'm even talking 30 years ago. I mean, those who have a long-term vision should have seen that if you have a long-term plan, so you don't do things in intermediate to ruin that plan. So, and of course, history is a very interesting field for research. So I don't know if every move that you do, you think what will happen in another 40, 50 years. I would like to believe that somebody thinks about it,
Yes.
and his advice is taken seriously by the leaders.
But you seem critical that Israel left Gaza, even if they had to leave unilaterally, as if it would have been better to stay if the choice was between not leaving at all or leaving unilaterally.
No, I supported the withdrawal.
You did?
Yeah, in the end of the day. I mean, we had to do it for our own sake.
Okay.
Because
it did result in a horrific number of years for Sderot.
Yeah, but on the ground, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know if there was the same perception or the same understanding that the moment that we leave, it will become a Hamastan
We didn't think
land. But other people would say that we supported the Hamas. I mean, we actually, by not thinking in depth and not maneuvering correctly, we brought the Hamas into the power again, just as we didn't understand the Shiites in southern Lebanon at the time, and we allowed the cracks to widen and the Hezbollah to come in. So it's very difficult to
This is Monday morning quarterbacking just a little bit. Hindsight is always 20/20, yes?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're saying that when the withdrawal took place, you were in favor
Yeah,
of
yeah,
it.
yeah. Because I think it was the right move. Because I think that the way that we were spending energy to protect those the settlements and the amount of terrorist attacks against them and against the army, trying to provide security for them, it was pushing the army into a corner or doing things instead of preparing for real war. We were dealing with these temporary actions, which, in the end of the day, were not didn't bring the same fruit that we expected or that we understood that it will never bear any fruit.
Okay. I want to make sure, though, our audience senses this. David, you've been a lifetime. You've spent a lifetime of service in the IDF. You have fought in a number of major battles. You have unfortunately had to fight the Arab world on more than one occasion. But as we talk here, there is a balance to what you're saying that is very striking, that you as an Israeli don't come in here and say the problem is all the Palestinians. Do I hear you correctly?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, because you gain a lot of life experience, especially serving in the military, when you are responsible for lives of people serving with you or under you. And when you realize that in the past and especially in the future, there aren't decisive wars anymore. I mean, you can drop the bomb, but then you make a decision that can end your life just as your enemy's one, especially in the Middle East or where Israel is. So it is true that the wars are a means to enhance political solutions, but to have a decisive war like the Six-Day War, which was an exception. We didn't. I don't think we used the fruits of the Six-Day War to enhance political solution, and we kept the stalemate and status quo that, in the end of the day, I think wasn't to our benefit.
Oh, that's so interesting. Are you saying that in the aftermath of the Six-Day War, Israel made mistakes?
Well, not even mistakes, but they didn't take any initiative. There were a few instances that there were openings. There were a few. I mean, we sat back and said, okay, now we are waiting for a phone call from Nasser. We're waiting for a phone call from other Arab leaders. Okay. If you sit and wait for the phone calls and you don't make the phone calls.
Here's the American Jewish narrative. The American Jewish narrative is, at the end of the Six-Day War, Levi Eshkol was the prime minister, and he basically offered the Arab world virtually all of the land that Israel had liberated, conquered, whatever word you wanted, that ultimately he would hand back the West Bank. It wasn't clear to whom, but he would hand back the West Bank in its entirety. He wanted to keep the old city of Jerusalem, but you're going to give back virtually all of the West Bank if the Arab world would make peace. And the Arab world and the Arab League went to Khartoum and issued the famous 3 no's: no negotiation, no recognition, no peace. And that as a result, the overture that Israel did make was rebuffed in its entirety. That's a very different narrative than Israel missed opportunities after the Six-Day War.
Now, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to change the narrative, because there is a lot of truth in the narrative. But when in the Six-Day War, I was a young lieutenant.
Where were you?
Okay, I fought in the Sinai.
Okay.
Okay. I was a young lieutenant. So whatever, as we say in Hebrew, ani chacham lachar maaseh. I'm wise many years later, because this wisdom came with a lot of experience of life and studying and reading documents and
yes.
and
so we'll
analysis.
digress for one moment.
Yeah.
What was the emotion you felt as a young lieutenant in the Sinai at the end of the Six-Day War?
Look, to be very honest with you, first of all, all of us were in Shamayim Elyonim, right, in the upper levels of sky. The truth of the matter is, I can recall now that I joined the big euphoria and the feeling of relief and so on. But again, I realized very quickly after that we were serving in the Sinai after the Six-Day War, right? An enormous piece of land. I understood that this was a bargaining chip in our hands, and understood that it gave us strategic depth. But I never enjoyed the feeling that we are now an empire, the new Israeli empire. I was actually quite scared, because we were a small number of people. I mean, when you used to drive in the Sinai for hours and hours and see the white sand on both sides of the road, which was usually covered with the sand because of sandstorms, empty, completely empty, you felt that it was too big on you. That was my feeling. I mean, I enjoyed it. I loved Sinai, the space. We didn't have to go to South America and to India and to the Far East after the military service. You could easily go to the Sinai for a few weeks and enjoy the solitude and whatever, okay? And like the young Israelis do now after the military service. So in that sense, it was nice. But I felt very comfortable with a small Israel. Of course, with a few improvements in the borders, to have a little more defensible borders and so on. But we defended ourselves very well, with a lot of intrusions from 1948 to 1967. Not an inch of that land was taken by any Arab countries. We were under threats. But you have to also be realistic. You have to realize between the narrative and the real life. And I think from reading and from the proven history that there were a few windows of opportunities that something could have moved. I can't say how and why. I don't have that information, but that's the feeling that you get from reading more and more research into this matter.
Are you sympathetic to Shalom Achshav, peace now?
Well, I'm sympathetic to peace. So if there's peace now, it's a nice slogan, peace now, because it's your desire. It doesn't mean the other side wants, those people on the other side.
Well, I'm trying to identify you for the audience. Are you Shalom Achshav?
I'm Shalom TV. I'm for Shalom TV. Look, again, I sympathize with a lot of their tendencies and their some of the people there are people that I worked with and I knew from the army service and from social life. So it's a big movement, and even in Shalom עכשיו there are a lot of people who are very realistic. I'm not talking about the very left and the very right.
I guess I wanted to make a point. My point is that although you have this very, in some way, I used the word balance before, there's something very all-encompassing about your approach. You don't come at this from a far-left position.
No, not far left for sure.
In some way, though,
yeah, you
are part of the very broad mainstream of Israeli life.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we have to be bold enough to take steps and to take chances.
Do you worry about what will happen in September at the United Nations? Do you think the Palestinians will seek some kind of resolution on statehood? And if it were to happen, do you worry about repercussions for the state of Israel?
Repercussions, I don't think it will change on the ground unless they come up and they decide, and it'll be one of the biggest mistakes, like many mistakes they did along the road, if they'll come out and turn back to violence. Because I don't think they'll achieve anything, and it'll distance the chances of advancing, at least in the eyes of the Israeli public, at least in my eyes. I can't speak for all the public. Okay. On the other hand, I don't think we have to be too scared of it. I mean, sometimes if you ignore it, I don't think the wave will go by. If I were a Palestinian today, I might say, okay, what do I have to lose? At least I'll get sympathy for the world. I'll show everybody around that most of the world supports me. But that's known today too. I mean, you don't have to go and have another United Nations vote to know where they're leaning to. At least a big majority there, which are not objective in any case. And for Israel, it might be a benefit that we'll see again who are our friends, or who are people that are realistic and understand the situation.
Now look internal to the life in Israel. We touched a moment ago on the economy, but I want to ask you two other kinds of issues. How often do you and your family go to the Western Wall?
How often do we go to? Well, I personally go there almost every week because
not as a tour guide.
No. Look, we don't go every day and every week.
Do you go once a year?
It's not a permanent ceremony. If we have an occasion and the Western Wall is in our hearts, in our minds, every day, every moment. So it doesn't need a physical presence next to the wall, because I put my note already once and it hadn't bear fruit. So I'm leaving the notes. And but what I'm saying is that I think we know what's the importance. It doesn't need our presence there every day, and even not once a year. We do visit occasionally in different instances.
If something brings you there.
No, look. There's because I said before, it's in our hearts and in our minds every day, 24 hours a day. There's no physical need to be there.
Okay, you know, an American Jew goes to Israel. He wants to go to the Western Wall.
It's natural.
Okay, and you know, a tourist comes to New York. They want to go to the Statue of Liberty.
The first time.
Right.
Yeah.
There are New Yorkers who may live here for a long time, never go to the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
Maybe they'll get maybe once. And my sense is that there are Israelis, that native Israelis, especially those who live all over the country, not in Jerusalem, for them, the Western Wall is a fact of Israeli life. It may not be something they go out of their way to visit.
It is true that there are many Israelis that up to a certain age never visited Jerusalem.
Never even visited Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. I'm not saying that about the wall.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean that the wall is not in their hearts.
That is correct. I understand. And both Americans love the Statue of Liberty, whether they ever go to Liberty Island or not.
But Well, there's a big difference between the Statue of Liberty,
Yes, there is.
which were
Yes,
not
there
even
is.
produced in the United States.
Yes.
The Kotel is made of stones
Yes,
from
but it
Jerusalem.
does symbolize something about America, as
Yeah.
the wall does symbolize something about
No,
Jewishness in the state
absolutely.
of Israel.
So-
Okay, and then I have my follow-up question.
Yeah, but by the way,
Go ahead.
you'll cause me to criticize the Israeli educational system, which I have a lot of criticism towards. That's the reason why many young Israelis have not visited the wall up to a certain period, and that's why the army in Israel, which by the way is not only a military force, it's also an educational force that's part of the society, sees that every soldier, no matter where he comes from and what his rank is, will visit the Kotel, not for ceremonies, but would visit it as a part of his Jewish being. Okay?
Interesting.
So the Kotel is part of our history. So it doesn't mean, I do say that you have to visit the Kotel at least once.
Okay.
But then the Kotel is in our hearts and minds that doesn't need a physical presence. Yeah.
David, do you and your friends care whether women can read the Torah at the Western Wall?
My circles are less involved I would say, less involved Jewishly.
With Jewish observance?
Yeah, Jewish observance, because, and I don't think it's a good thing, but it's a fact that my friends say, I'm in Israel, I speak Hebrew, which is the language of the Bible. I'm on the land of Israel. I believe in the history of Israel. I don't have to do anything further. I don't think it's good Jewishly. Because I
It's
think
terrible Jewishly.
Yeah, because
but
there's
many
more,
Israelis say
there's
it.
more to that.
Of course.
But in the sense of equality between men and women, the general feeling will be, yes, we are for it. They won't pay too much attention to the issue.
Yes, that is my sense.
Unfortunately.
My sense is that some of the issues that energize American Jewry vis-a-vis Israel when it comes to Jewish observance, what is the way in which people are married or buried? Are non-Orthodox rabbis permitted to officiate formally at a marriage ceremony or at a burial? What are the rights of women at the Western Wall? To what extent does the ultra-Orthodox have a stranglehold on the Jewish observance of the State of Israel? In many ways, American Jews are very concerned about the lack of American-style Jewish pluralism in Israel. And my sense is that's an American Jewish concern much more than it is an indigenous Israeli concern. And I wanted to know the extent to which you think I'm right or I'm missing something.
No, you're absolutely right. In my mind, you're absolutely right. But you see, there's a big difference between living in the United States, Jewishly, than living in Israel. Because here, if you don't make a very clear cut to your feeling of to your observance and your feeling of Jewishly, you won't remain Jewish for very quickly. You won't remain Jewish.
Yes.
That's my observance.
And what about in Israel?
Look, now in Israel, first of all, our starting point is much better than yours, because we are in a Jewish state that defines itself as a Jewish state. So if you like it or not, you are in a Jewish state. You can fight the Jewish state, but I think the 99% of the Israelis are for a Jewish state.
And you don't want Israel to be a Hebrew-speaking secular state.
No, I want it to be based on Jewish tradition, on Jewish values, on what it means to be Jewish. And you can decide for yourself, or you can decide, every group can decide for itself what it means for them to be Jewish. For one is to speak Hebrew. I mean, Israelis don't distinguish clearly between the Israeliness and the Jewishness. Mm-hmm. But if you go down to the bottom of their heart, I think it's Jewish and then Israeli, and not Israeli and then Jewish. Mm-hmm. It comes out as if it's first Israeli, because for the regular life, for them it's natural. You see, the Jewishness is natural. I'm worried about it, because I don't think it's enough. And I think that our educational system should deal with this issue seriously, and not once in a few years come out with a book of 100 terms or 100 criteria for Jewishness, and you have to learn it by heart and then have a test on it. That's not the way to.
I agree with you.
To deal with Jewishness.
Do you understand that American Jews wish that more native Israelis cared about non-Orthodox expressions of Judaism in Israel?
They have a point. They have a point about it. I'm not, since I was involved in Jewish education
Yes.
and informal Jewish education for quite a long period of time. I mean, I did it in the army, but after the army, I saw it part of my being. So I am familiar more than an average Israeli. But they have a point in it. But as I mentioned before, I think it's part of our concern if we really want to have strong Jewish roots and identity, and know if you want to fight well, you have to know why you're fighting. It's not fighting only for your survival as a human being, but it's a survival of your Jewishness.
I could talk to you for hours and hours.
Me too. I didn't think I'd be so that comfortable in front of cameras and so on.
This
which I don't do
flew
every day.
by. I had a whole other section. I wanted to talk about some of your experiences at these key moments in Jewish life. The next time you're around, would you try to sit with me again, and we'll have part 2 of this discussion.
When I'll see the part 1 and I'll see how good I am, if I were good at all, yeah,
You were
with pleasure.
wonderful.
I think it's important for people to listen to somebody from the public, and not only a political figure or speaker or whatever.
Absolutely. You make a marvelous contribution to the people you touch. I was lucky enough to have you in my life, and you're a dear
Vice
friend.
versa.
And I treasure you. So yes, I will make sure you get to see this interview, and you can make a choice. But I really hope you'll let me. This will be part 1, and we'll do part 2 the next time you're around.
With pleasure.
Thank you, David. And those were the thoughts of David Raz, an Israeli citizen, a member of the State of Israel. He's done the reserves as a lieutenant colonel in the Israeli Defense Forces. He was in Israeli intelligence. He works with the Jewish Agency, and he is one of today's premier Israel tour guides. I hope you enjoyed meeting him. By the way, if you'd like to arrange for David to be your family or your group, or you're on an upcoming trip and you would like David to be with you as a tour guide, and again, how lucky you would be if you had him, you may email David Raz at rd463@gmail.com, rd463@gmail.com, and you can tell him you saw him on Shalom TV. As always, I'd love you to share your reactions to some of the things David had to say. Please write me, email me, post on our Facebook wall, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. And so until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.